The war had taught French prisoners one truth above all others. Information was a weapon, and those who controlled it won the war before the first shot. In camps, behind wire, under occupation, they had learned to read the silences between propaganda broadcasts, to listen for what was not said. By 1944, after years of Nazi and Vichy censorship, truth itself had become a contraband item, rationed, distorted, or withheld entirely. Then came the Americans. When the 82nd Airborne arrived at the transit camp near Reims in late August, nobody expected what would happen. The soldiers carried canteens, ammunition, and cigarettes, but they also carried something that seemed almost offensive in its casualness: newspapers, the Stars and Stripes, American editions of the New York Times. Handwritten letters from home passed freely between men. To the French prisoners, hollow-eyed, gaunt, cautious, it looked like chaos. Why would an army allow soldiers to read uncensored reports? Why would officers permit criticism? Why would newspapers print death counts and military setbacks alongside photographs of generals? Over 7 days, 3 French prisoners would begin to understand that what looked like weakness was actually something they had never been allowed to imagine: strength rooted in truth. Chapter 1. The newspaper on the table. Etienne Marchal had survived 4 years of captivity by becoming invisible. He spoke only when ordered. He moved only when directed. He had learned to erase his face from memory before the guards even looked at him. At 32, he was grey, not with age, but with the calculated neutrality of a man whose survival depended on leaving no impression. The prisoner compound was divided into sectors. Sector D held French officers, NCOs, and skilled workers deemed useful enough to keep alive but dangerous enough to watch. Etienne had been a lieutenant until France fell. Now he was simply a number, 4847. On the morning of August 28th, an American sergeant named Klein entered the compound to distribute medical supplies. He was young, perhaps 24, with the casual confidence of a man who had never been hungry for more than a few hours. He carried a canvas bag and tucked under one arm a folded newspaper. Etienne noticed it because everything in a prisoner's life becomes hypervisible. A dropped cigarette, a torn seam, a newspaper left on a table. Klein set the bag down and began distributing packages. When he finished, he unfolded the newspaper and sat on a bench. He read slowly, turning pages, his jaw moving slightly as he mouthed words. Around him, American GIs moved in and out of the compound, unconcerned, ordinary, armed but not hostile. Etienne watched from 30 meters away, pretending to repair a fence post. The newspaper's headline faced toward him: "Third Army advances despite supply lines stretched thin." It was a military setback described in an American newspaper inside an American camp, written plainly, printed, distributed. Etienne had not seen an uncensored headline since 1940. He looked away. To stare too long was to invite attention, but his hands trembled against the fence post. That afternoon, another prisoner, Claude Devereux, a former journalist from Lyon, approached him at the latrine. "Did you see it?" Claude whispered. "The newspaper." "They left it on the table, in the open. I read it." "Etienne, they printed a story criticizing the supply plan, a criticism of their own army, and nobody arrested the writer." Etienne said nothing. This was a trap, a test, or madness. But that night, lying in the barracks, he understood that Claude might have seen something real, and that understanding terrified him more than hunger ever had. Chapter 2. The Confession in Whispers. By the 3rd day, Etienne had gathered fragments. American soldiers left newspapers on tables deliberately. They discussed headlines openly. They complained about rationing, strategy, and command decisions, sometimes loudly enough for prisoners to overhear. To a man trained in censorship, this was incomprehensible. In the camp's kitchen sector, where Etienne worked 3 days a week, an American corporal named Martinez sat during meal distribution and read aloud, to no one in particular, to everyone listening, about American casualty figures from the liberation of Paris. Accurate figures, unfiltered, acknowledged. "Christ," Martinez muttered, shaking his head. 37,000 in the bridgehead. 37,000, and Eisenhower knew it would cost that before we went in. A French prisoner, Henri Gascon, a farmer's son from Normandy, couldn't restrain himself. "And still, you tell it? The truth?" Martinez looked up, genuinely confused by the question. "Yeah, why not?" "Because—" Henri's voice dropped to barely audible. "Because then the people know the cost. They might question the war." Martinez folded the newspaper and leaned back. "My mother reads this every morning. Reads about the war. Reads about when we screw up. And you know what? She still thinks we should win, because she believes it's worth the cost. But she has to know the cost first. That's how it works where I come from." Henri's face crumpled, not from emotion, but from the effort of understanding something forbidden. That night, Claude found Etienne behind the barracks. The former journalist's hands were shaking. "I remember," Claude said quietly. "I remember what a real newspaper felt like. Before. When I could write what I saw, not what I was told to see, I thought that part of me was dead." "It is," Etienne said. But he was lying. He could feel something fractioning inside him, something that had been calcified, beginning to soften. "What if it wasn't?" Claude asked. "What if they showed us something we could actually believe in, and it scared us more than the lies ever did?" Chapter 3. The Contraband Truth. On the 6th day, Klein approached Etienne directly. The American soldier carried 2 canteens and a newspaper folded into thirds. "You read English?" Klein asked. Etienne's instinct screamed danger. "A little, sir. This is yesterday's Stars and Stripes. Take it. Read it. Tell me what you think." Etienne did not take it. Receiving contraband was a camp violation that could mean confinement. Klein set it on the ground between them. "It's not contraband here. It's a newspaper. You're human. You can read." The American turned and walked away, leaving Etienne standing over the folded paper as if it were a live grenade. He left it for 3 hours. Then, when the light was failing and fewer eyes were watching, he picked it up. The headline struck him first. "Army calls for investigation into supply chain failures. General admits miscalculation." His heart hammered. An admission. A military failure. Printed. Distributed to enlisted men. Discussed openly among officers who read it over breakfast. Claude found him reading in the barracks after lights out, hidden beneath a blanket. The journalist's breath caught. "Is it real?" Etienne nodded, unable to speak. They read it together in the dark, whispering the words aloud like a prayer they thought they had forgotten. By the second reading, Claude was weeping silently. "Do you understand what this is?" he asked. "This isn't just a newspaper. This is, they're telling their own people the truth, even when it costs them, even when it makes them look weak. And they believe that telling the truth makes them stronger, not weaker." "That's impossible," Etienne whispered. "Yes," Claude agreed. "It's impossible, and they're doing it anyway." If this story feels real to you, tell us in the comments. What would you have done in their place? Chapter 4. The Machinery of Silence. The realization carried a price. On the 7th day, the American commander announced that 50 prisoners would be transferred to Calais for reconstruction work, a move toward eventual repatriation. Names were called. Etienne's was not, neither was Claude's, but Henri's was. As the trucks assembled, Henri approached the 2 men. "I'm going to Calais," he said, "and I'm going to tell people about the newspapers, about how Americans read the truth and didn't collapse, about how freedom is stronger than fear." "They won't believe you," Claude said. "Then I'll tell them again," Henri said, "until they do." After the trucks left, Etienne and Claude understood something darker than they had anticipated. The American newspaper was not propaganda. It was something more dangerous. It was real, and they had spent 4 years in a world where reality itself had been classified. That afternoon, Martinez appeared with a new stack of newspapers, this time 3 days old, some with actual battle reports from German sources, captured documents reprinted alongside American analysis. One headline read, "German command admits retreat plans to high command. Intercepted transmission reveals strategic collapse." "Why would they do this?" Claude asked aloud, forgetting caution. "Showing enemy weaknesses. It helps morale, yes, but it also teaches enemy soldiers what the military knows. It's tactically insane." "Or," Martinez said, sitting beside them, "it teaches enemy soldiers that the war is lost, so they should surrender. And it teaches the whole world that we don't need to hide. We can print the truth and still win." Etienne thought about propaganda, about the controlled broadcasts in camp, about the way lies had calcified into walls around their minds. And he thought about what it would mean to live in a world where you could read tomorrow's newspaper and it might contradict today's orders. And that was acceptable. It was almost unimaginable. Chapter 5. The letter from outside. On the 9th day, Klein brought mail. Among the letters distributed to American soldiers was one addressed to no one in particular, a Dear Any Soldier letter from a schoolteacher in Connecticut. Klein read it aloud, as he had read other letters, allowing the words to pass through the compound like wind. The letter described a child asking about the war. The schoolteacher had given the child a newspaper, the same New York Times, the same Stars and Stripes, and asked the child to read the casualty reports, the analyses, the criticisms. "I wanted her to understand," the teacher wrote, "that in a free country we don't hide the cost. We share it, because that's how we know we're free, when we can bear the truth together." Claude stopped moving. The letter was folded and passed hand to hand among the American soldiers. Some read it twice. "That's my daughter," Etienne said suddenly. Everyone turned. "Not her, but a child like that. I had a daughter in Lyon. She would be 9 now. I don't know if—" His voice broke. "I don't know if she's alive, but if she is, and if she grows up in a France where newspapers can be honest again, where she can read the truth instead of swallowing lies, then maybe." He couldn't finish. That night, Claude took the letter. Klein left it behind deliberately and read it until he had memorized it. The American had done something impossible. He had made Etienne believe that his suffering had meant something beyond mere survival, that France might be rebuilt on something other than enforced silence. Chapter 6. The Understanding. On the 11th day, the camp commander, an American major named Caldwell, gathered the remaining French prisoners. There were 247 of them. "You'll be transferred to a holding compound near Paris," he said. "From there, repatriation will begin. France is being liberated. When you go home, some of you will go to cities that were destroyed. Some will go to families you haven't seen in years. Some will find that what you left behind is gone." He paused. "But France will have a free press again. Newspapers will print what happened, all of it, the collaboration, the resistance, the cost, the victory. It won't be controlled, it won't be filtered. And that's going to be difficult, because lies are easier than truth. But a country that can face its own truth is a country that can heal." The major looked directly at the prisoners. That's what we're fighting for. That's what your sacrifice has bought. Not for flags, for the right to know what's really happening. Etienne felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, which seemed too fragile a thing. Something harder, a stubborn refusal to retreat into numbness. Claude gripped his shoulder. "We're going home," he whispered, "to print the truth." As the prisoners were loaded into trucks, Klein handed Etienne a stack of newspapers, 6 days' worth of stars and stripes. "For the journey," he said, "so you remember. If this battle still echoes in your mind, hit like. It helps these untold memories stay alive." Chapter 7. The Silence. After the truck journey to Paris took 36 hours, Etienne read the newspapers aloud to the men crowded beside him. He translated the English, haltingly, carefully, but the meaning was always the same: unfiltered accounts of military, political, and human reality. No heroic propaganda, no hidden costs, just what happened and what it meant. By the time they reached the outskirts of Paris, several men were crying. The city was half destroyed, streaked with scorch marks, lined with collapsed buildings and hastily painted slogans. American soldiers stood at checkpoints. French flags hung from windows, and on makeshift newsstands, some just boards leaning against rubble, there were newspapers. Le Monde, France Libre, Libération, real newspapers, uncensored, published by men who had been underground, printing truth in cellars. Now publishing openly, Etienne bought a copy of Liberation for 2 American cigarettes. The headline read, "Paris freed, cost in blood, and the moral reckoning that begins now." He stood in the street, holding it, and understood that what he and Claude and Henri had witnessed in that American compound was not propaganda in reverse. It was the assumption, so ordinary to Americans it went unremarked, that citizens could handle the truth. That strength came from transparency, that a nation need not hide its wounds to survive. Claude appeared beside him, holding his own copy of Le Monde. His hands were steady. "We survived 4 years of lies," Claude said. "Now we have to learn to live with truth. It will be harder." "Yes," Etienne agreed, "but at least it will be real." That night, in a refugee center, Etienne began to write down what he had seen. Not testimony, not memoir, just the simple account of how a French prisoner learned what American soldiers already knew. That information free from control is not chaos, it is the foundation on which free people stand. By morning he had filled 6 pages. He did not know if anyone would read them, but he knew they would be true, and that, after 4 years of enforced silence, was a revolutionary act. Subscribe for more true human stories of courage, conscience, and the wars that never really end. The wars that consume us are not always fought with weapons. Some are fought in the space between what is said and what is hidden. And some are won not by those who shout the loudest, but by those patient enough to listen, to a newspaper left on a table, to a letter from a schoolteacher, to the sound of a printing press running free.